There are three major holy religions in the world right now: Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. And while these vary greatly in their beliefs and practices, one thing is common in almost all these: the holy sites. This is why, throughout the course of history, there have been many wars by the three sides to gain control of these sacred places. The Crusades are an example of this. These were a string of wars fought between Christians and Muslims over territory that both faiths held sacred. But how did the Crusades end up being so famous? And what really happened in these battles? Let's explore this in today's video. Between 1096 and 1291, there were a total of 8 large-scale crusade operations, each of which had varying degrees of success. Christians from Europe rose to prominence in the 11th century as key protagonists in the bloody struggles for territory in the Middle East. However, they lagged behind other Mediterranean civilizations like the Byzantine Empire and the Islamic Empire of the Middle East and North Africa. But, as the invading Seljuk Turks caused Byzantium to lose a lot of lands, General Alexius Comnenus captured the Byzantine throne in 1081, becoming Emperor Alexius I after years of anarchy and civil conflict. Alexius, fearing the threat posed by the Turks, dispatched envoys to Pope Urban II in 1095, pleading for the assistance of mercenary troops from the west. The Pope rallied Western Christians at the Council of Clermont in southern France in November 1095 to help the Byzantines regain sovereignty of the Holy Land from the Muslims. Religious knightly military orders such as the Templars, Teutonic Knights, and Hospitallers all started during the Crusades. These militias fought to keep the Holy Land safe for Christians and visitors. The Crusades officially started at this time. Troops from various parts of Western Europe came together to form 4 Crusader armies led by men named Raymond of St. Giles, Godfrey of Bouillon, Hugh of Vermandois, and Bohemond of Taranto. In August of 1096, these bands of travelers set off for Byzantium. Peter the Hermit, a charismatic preacher, led a less structured group of knights and commoners known as the People's Crusade to embark on the journey first. Despite Alexius's warnings to wait for the rest, Peter's army marched over the Bosporus Strait in early August. This led to a defeat by the Turkish at Chibotis, marking the first significant battle between the Crusaders and the Muslims. The same year, another band of Crusaders commanded by the legendary Count Emicho massacred Jews in several Rhineland towns, sparking widespread outrage and a severe rift between Jews and Christians. Alexius demanded an oath of loyalty from the Crusaders' leaders when the 4 main armies arrived in Constantinople. He also wanted them to acknowledge his sovereignty over any territory they retook from the Turks or conquered in the future. None resisted it but Bohemond. The Crusaders and their Byzantine allies attacked the Seljuk city of Nicaea, present-day Iznik, in May 1097, capitulating it in June. The Crusaders and Byzantine leaders' relationship worsened as they marched across Anatolia together, but they could still take the magnificent Syrian city of Antioch in June 1098. The Crusaders then set out for Jerusalem, which the Egyptian Fatimids or Shiite Muslims ruled. The Christian army arrived there in June 1099 and, by mid-July, had coerced the city's governor into surrender. However, the Crusaders massacred hundreds of men, women, and children upon their triumphant, despite Tancred's assurances of protection. This marked the end of the First Crusade. Many of the Crusaders returned home. Those who survived the conquest built up governments in Jerusalem, Edessa, Antioch, and Tripoli, 4 major Western colonies known as Crusader states. The Crusader nations, protected by fortified castles, remained on top of the region until about 1130, when Muslim armies began making successes in their own holy war against the Christians. The northernmost Crusader realm was destroyed when Seljuk general Zangi, governor of Mosul, took Edessa in 1144. The loss shocked Europe and prompted Western Christian leaders to call for a new crusade. Thus, in 1147, the Second Crusade began under the leadership of 2 monarchs, King Louis VII of France and King Conrad III of Germany. In October of that year, the Turks destroyed Conrad's army in Dorylaeum, the site of a major Christian victory during the First Crusade. Assembling their forces in Jerusalem, Louis and Conrad planned an assault on the Syrian capital of Damascus with a force of 50,000. The ruler of Damascus had to reach out to Zangi's successor in Mosul, Nur al-Din, for help. The combined Muslim troops handed the Crusaders a crushing defeat, putting an end to the Second Crusade for good. In 1154, Nur al-Din incorporated Damascus into his burgeoning kingdom. In 1169, Din's army, under the command of Shirkuh and his nephew Saladin, took Cairo, forcing the Crusader army to retreat from Egypt. Shirkuh's death allowed Saladin to seize power and quickly expand his conquests. When Saladin launched his campaign against the Kingdom of Jerusalem in 1187, his men annihilated the Christian army and won back the strategic city. King Philip II of France, King Richard I of England, and the aged Emperor Frederick Barbarossa launched the Third Crusade in response to these devastating losses. In September 1191, at the Battle of Arsuf, Richard's army finally prevailed against Saladin. From the city of Jaffa, which he had retaken, Richard advanced on Jerusalem, but he did not lay siege to the Holy City. Richard and Saladin signed a pact in September 1192 and terminated the Third Crusade. However, it was not the end. Only 6 years had passed when Pope Innocent III called for a new crusade in 1198. At the time, internal and external power conflicts in Europe and Byzantium led to the Crusaders changing their purpose to overthrow Alexius III and install his nephew, Alexius IV, as emperor. Alexius IV was assassinated in a palace coup in the early years of 1204 as he attempted to subjugate the Byzantine Church to Rome. As a result, the Crusaders went to war with Constantinople, and the majestic Byzantine metropolis was nearly destroyed. This capped off the Fourth Crusade. Throughout the rest of the 13th century, several crusades sought to defeat all parties considered adversaries of the Christians. In 1221, after an assault on Egypt in the Fifth Crusade, the Crusaders surrendered to Muslim defenses led by Saladin's nephew, al-Malik al-Kamil. Frederick II, Emperor of Germany, negotiated with al-Kamil in 1229 to successfully transfer Jerusalem to Crusader rule without bloodshed. This event is now known as the Sixth Crusade. A decade after the treaty's expiration, Muslims quickly retook the city. France's King Louis IX led an expedition against Egypt that lasted from 1248 to 1254. However, he was soundly defeated in this fight, the Seventh Crusade. The Crusaders' last stronghold, Acre, fell to the Muslim Mamluks in 1291. Historians generally agree that the Crusader states and the Crusades ended with this setback. Although the Europeans lost and the Muslims won in the end, there's no denying that the centuries of fighting that the Crusades wrought had an effect on the cultures and politics of the Middle East and Western Europe that lasts even to this day.